Let's pray. Thank you, Father, for a beautiful day. Thank you for the privilege of serving Christ. Thank you for your strength and enablement, for your long suffering toward us, and for the privilege of being your servants. We just ask that you be greatly honored today in our discussion. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Yeah, just a couple of pictures of the stamps and some literature. This is the one on the right there is printed at Moody. And it's just giving some statistics. This following the passing, the death of this couple. 2027 Institute students have entered foreign missionary service. 100 service missionaries in home fields. Institute trained workers have found ready acceptance by missionary board societies and churches. Is God calling you? So anyway, it's kind of an advertisement, but there were a lot of people, just like in the case of Jim Elliot, a lot of people responded, as a result of that. So John and Betty Stamp. Okay. We're going to switch to one that's probably a lot less known. That's Paul Carlson. I'm going to guess that nobody had heard of him before, unless, in your reading, yes, but before that, probably not. Let me just put this away. And, his story is similar. In other words, the motive for his death is also more related to communism versus capitalism. The fact that he was an American, in this case, had a lot to do with it. So here we go. Dr. Paul Carlson. He was born in California the same year my mother was, 1928. And he dedicated his life for missionary service as a teenager. Interesting. You might ask, how does somebody know, as a teenager, that God is calling him or her to missions? Well, you don't always. In fact, I would say that it's probably the exception to the rule. To hear somebody say, God called me to this or that, when I was a teenager. It does happen. He completed medical studies at Stanford there in California. And he married Lois, and she was a nurse. So they're well equipped to do medical missions. Where the Lord might take them. But something happened. He gradually lost interest in missions, even questioning the existence of God. Isn't that something? And again, this isn't the first time we've encountered something like that. Does it tell us in the book what led him to lose interest in missions? Do you remember anything that stated about what drew him away? All right. Down at the bottom of page 406, it says he met his wife Lois. She was from Michigan. They got engaged in 1949. He returned to California to continue his medical course at Stanford University. 8 years later, with a wife and 2 babies and an MD degree, he was ready to begin his residency. I can relate to this right now because my son-in-law is just getting ready to begin his residency. He's going into urology. He's finishing a bunch of interviews, and on February 1st, we'll find out where he's going. Could be anywhere. So it says it was a hectic time, and according to Lois, his wife, the subject of medical missions was mentioned less and less. Okay? Until eventually it disappeared completely from our discussions. Spiritually, he was going through a difficult period in his life, questioning the very existence of a triune God. So what God used to redirect his path was actually a letter he received talking about the need for medical missionaries in the Congo. Okay, that came in 1961. I was a year old. He received a letter from the Christian Medical Society presenting an urgent need for medical doctors in the Congo. By the way, you notice that Christian Medical Society, that's just another one of those examples of specialization that has become very important. Now there's a whole mission society or mission agency devoted to medical missions. Okay, and which one do you know about? You remember anybody that was here at conference that represents a medical agency?
Medical missions outreach.
Right, Dr. Steve Taylor, who spoke and gave testimony at the banquet, right? Yep. Well, let me just ask, what do you think about that? You know, what he went through. I know we don't have a lot of details. He's busy in medical school. He's getting ready for, I mean, just tons of things going on. And he's finding his interest, in connection to missions waning. What may cause that type of thing to happen?
Is it like maybe the thought of like stability where he has a family now and 2 kids and just want to settle down and have a good job doing medical stuff, whereas like missions, you have no idea where you're going or what you'd lose or I don't know. You have to give up a lot.
Yeah, when you start putting down roots, like he did, he got married and had children. Now, was he wrong for doing that? Of course not. Okay. Yeah, that can happen. Sometimes something that seems really definite, and exciting in a given context, when you're, earlier in life, can change when life changes. Let me ask you this. If somebody has a desire for missions and that wanes at some point, is it a given that means the person is disobeying God's call on his life?
I don't think so. Because there's times in life where we might not necessarily be disobeying God, but we're not. Like he was super busy with medical school. He may not have been in the Word like he should have been, or life happens and God still led him into missions. So,
All right. Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to remember. If, for instance, if a teenager, let's say a junior in high school, says, I believe God's calling me to be a missionary, okay? Goes to college, or whatever, and then, somewhere along the way that begins to wane, that is not an automatic indicator that this guy is falling away from God's will, okay? Because what he perceives to be God's direction as a junior in high school may not, in fact, be what God wants him to do. And I think it's important for us to remember that, because desires come and go. I mean, how many different kinds of things have you thought you would really enjoy doing throughout your life? Can some of you name some other things that you thought about doing along as you were growing up, things that you thought that I would really enjoy doing that? Nothing comes to mind? You never really had any ambitions?
I thought about doing nursing for a while. And God's I still love the medical field, but he's kind of changed direction specifically. So it's like, I'm not doing the nursing part, but it's still kind of.
Mm-hmm. So did you struggle when that decision came, not to do nursing? Did you struggle with potential feelings of guilt and, being insensitive to the Lord's direction or forsaking his call or anything like that?
Not guilt, but just like a sense of lostness. I don't know, like not knowing, like I had a plan and then something started changing and I was like, is this actually God's plan for me? And I was just like, I don't know what to do now.
So you felt kind of disoriented, swimming around, wondering where to go, aimlessly wandering. Yeah. How long did that last?
Not very long, because at the same time he was showing me that he didn't want me to do nursing, he was bringing faith people into my life, and I wasn't planning to go to faith for 2 more years or something. And he was just making it clear, I don't want you to do this, but I do want you to do this. So he was gracious in not letting it be a long time.
Okay, good, thanks. Anybody else?
I don't know, I came to faith, put down OL, so I want to do business, and then I don't know, like the spring semester of my sophomore year, I was like, I don't see myself doing something in business, and And I felt more of a tug to like do something in like ministry. Not really like specifically, but kind of more as like general. So I picked biblical counseling, kind of broad.
Is yours biblical studies / counseling?
Yeah. And I can kind of like pick around my electives too. Take a little bit of everything.
Okay. Yeah. Good. To give you a basic toolkit,
Mm-hmm.
and especially maybe in counseling, there's an emphasis there that you can use wherever you go. Good. How about you two? Anything?
All my ideas I had as a kid are embarrassing.
This is being recorded, so.
I mean, when I always knew I wanted to be a nurse, but when COVID happened, I couldn't get into, well, I was in the nursing program, but I was told I had to get the COVID vaccine, and like I had worked through the outbreak in the nursing home. So then I thought, well, maybe God doesn't want me to be a nurse. So that was hard, and I came here just doing Bible because I didn't know. But then I switched to missionary nursing because then I mean, COVID things got more under control, but I felt too like that really was what God wanted me to do. So yeah, I don't know.
Good. Sharon, how about you?
I wanted to do EMT firefighting, just because it like every day is so different.
You like that?
Yeah. And I don't really like school, and so there's not really that much school you have to do to be a firefighter EMT in some states. In Illinois, it's really tough, but in Florida, it would have been easier. You're in fire school for like 3 months, so that's like kind of like boot camp, I guess.
Mhm.
And then you take EMT classes for like a semester or two.
That's
And then
it?
you can work up to being a paramedic if you want to get more pay. So I was pretty interested in that.
You're wired, you and your sister are both kind of wired that way.
Mhm.
You know, like to move around, you like challenge, you like the unknown, you like, you're high risk people that way, right? Which is interesting. It's really cool.
Mhm.
God wires everybody differently. Yeah. You take after either your parents that way, or you?
I guess so. I mean, both my parents they were D1 athletes in college, and then my mom was already working before she got married as a physical therapist, I guess.
Interesting. The reason I'm taking this kind of time to talk about this, because I know that a lot of students go through this kind of thing. And they tend to feel like, what happened? I was walking with the Lord my junior year in high school, just, now, what happened? How have I become just desensitized to the Lord? And it may not be a desensitizing. Now, is there something about his case that tells you, wait a minute, there's a spiritual issue here going on? I mean, besides losing interest in missions, what else was he doing?
Questioning the existence of
Yeah. Okay, so obviously there's a whole lot more. In other words, if he's still maintaining his walk with the Lord, but the idea of missions is beginning to wane and he's wondering about that, that's a whole different story. But when you couple that together with the questioning the very existence of God, that something has drawn him away from the Word, something has drawn him away from the Lord. Okay, so that's a telltale sign. Okay, but I think what a lot of students here deal with, is not that. They really do want to walk with the Lord. They're trying to maintain a relationship with the Lord, but then, things change and they wonder. So, but God was very gracious, and in 1961, he gets this letter, and here's the deal. It says what caught his attention was that it was not a request for lifetime service. So God, in his grace, gave him something bite-sized that he thought, okay, I can do this. In fact, he says, perhaps subconsciously, he was hoping to fulfill his teenage commitment in 4 months. He accepted the call. In other words, he's kind of looking now, okay, all right, I can go and do this, and then be done with that, put it behind me, and go on with what I want to do. And so God knew that he needed something like that he could do it, and that God would use that eventually to grab his heart, which is exactly what happened. Just one. Yeah, they left. They left in 1961. And they mention in context here that the Congo war for independence against Belgium, remember the Belgian Congo and King Leopold and all that? So the situation was highly volatile, and yet they went, which is interesting. It really is interesting. But while he was there, it's like God just warmed his heart again, and things began to. So, whatever this questioning of the existence of God was, there was still a tenderness in his heart, and God knew exactly what he needed to rekindle that. that was interesting. So what happens? Well, here's the invitation. It's to do a 4-month medical stint. Quick way to fulfill his mission obligation. No, that's kind of what you. Do you remember who else we studied? Oh dear, or have we? A lady doctor who went through that. She was going to go and just do a medical stint. Did we cover that yet in here?
Was she helping out her mom or something?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember.
Because I did this intro to missions. And I can't remember. Ida Scudder. Yeah, maybe we haven't talked about her here. She was an MK, but she wanted to be a medical doctor or nurse practitioner, something like that. I can't remember, but she heard about problem her mom was having, so she thought, I'll just go and do my time and then be done with my missionary obligation. Yeah. And by the way, that's not necessarily wrong. In other words, it might be that God just wants you to go and do a contribution. So he goes to the Congo alone in 61, and let's see, June 16, he left Lois and he flew by himself. So what happens? Well, he has this life-changing short-term ministry there. The Independence War is going on. It started in 60 apparently, and then 61 is when he went. There's political unrest. Remember, there's a power vacuum in the Congo because Belgians are moving out, and Congo doesn't know how to handle that independence. And he saw, when he got there, he just overwhelmed with the medical plight of people there. That's what God used to tug his heart. Remember with Ida Scudder, or maybe we didn't study her, but with Ida Scudder, while she was there helping her mom, there were 3 ladies one night, all who lost their babies because they didn't get medical attention. And that just kind of horrorized her. God just used that to get a hold of her. So he comes back to the States a changed man, basically. He says, that God really does want me there. So you could use this as an illustration of the value of short-term. And one of the things that a short-term mission can do is confirm the will of God, or, at least direct somebody that way. But he still had to deal with the attractions of a comfortable life. Now, I'm laughing because you ask my son-in-law right now how attractive things are. They're not really attractive right now. He's had to do he had to fill out 33 applications to different medical schools that were potential hosts for his residency. And then he had 18 of them respond offering interviews. And then that's all going to be, he's got to prioritize where he thinks he might want to go. And then right in the middle of all this, the lady that lived upstairs and her dishwasher broke and flooded their condominium down there, and they owned it. They didn't just rent it, so they had to. And then his residency is going to be 5 years. So she's pregnant with child number 2. My daughter is, and they're due at the end of February. And February 1 is where he's going to learn where he's going to be going. And they'll be moving after he graduates in May. I mean, you talk about an upheaval in their lives. Now, my daughter is actually 37. She got married later in life. And he's 7 years younger. He's only 30. Interesting, but so he gets through all of that, the residency and stuff, and he sees the attractions of a comfortable life. Okay, here's a question for you. If you have 2 options to serve the Lord, one of them, let's just use his scenario. One of them is to make really good money and live in a nice suburban neighborhood in the United States, or go to the Congo where there's civil war and strife and limited medical supplies. To what extent should your decision be made on a contrast between comfort and the struggles in the Congo? Is one of those innately more spiritual than the other? No. Is there anything spiritual about saying, I'm going to go to the harder place to serve? Not in and of itself, right? Look at Dr. Luke in the Bible. He was a medical doctor, and he traveled with Paul, but there are people who have a choice to serve in a place like the Congo, but they feel God's leading them to serve in a suburban area in America. That's not wrong. it's really easy to think, well, it's obvious, if I'm going to really have a heart to sacrifice myself for the Lord, I need to go to the harder place. Harder is not necessarily more spiritual. Okay? If your motive for staying in suburban America is because you're not willing to pay a price to serve God when you feel like he's leading you there, that's different. That was his case. He came back and said, look, I don't make a choice. God has ordered my heart to go. I can't stay here. But it wasn't because it's wrong to live here. It's because he just was convinced that God was leading him there. So just keep that in mind, because sometimes people get the wrong impression. We hear of missionaries. We supported our church a missionary family who's serving in an upper class community, which means their support level has to be higher, because in order to live in that upper class neighborhood, they need more money. It's a higher standard of living. And it's easy to look at somebody like that and say, yeah, okay, they want to serve, they want to reach upper class people for the Lord. And along the way, they get a nicer home, a nicer car, you know what I'm saying? It's easy to point fingers when that sort of thing happens. And I just hope that won't be something you'd give into. I've been tempted to give into that myself. Compare that with somebody that's really sacrificing financially. It's not the final court of appeal. All right. But he had to deal with that in light of the fact he really felt that the Spirit of God was tugging on his heart to go to the Congo. So they went in 63. That's the year my wife was born. Why am I giving you all these birthdays? Because I connect with this, okay? Just put up with it for me. And he goes to the Evangelical Covenant Church of America, which they're going to be, covenant, they're going to be reformed in their theology and all that. But hey, still people love the Lord and preaching the gospel of Christ with them.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What do you mean by together in the Congo?
He goes with it. First time he went alone.
Okay.
Remember? And they did that 4-month stint, left his wife and kids here. Now he comes back and God's burdened his heart, and they prepare and they go together.
So this is the second trip?
Yep, second trip. First trip was 2 years earlier in 61. So the Civil War begins in 60. He goes on that short-term stint in 61. Then in 63, they go back, which means they were able to raise support pretty quickly to be able to go, that quickly. I'm guessing that those who supported him on that 4-month stint probably, for the most part, retained their support. So he just had to get some extra support for his family to be able to go. We had 2 kids. I don't know if he had other kids after that or not. I don't remember what the book says. The 2 children. Well, not long after they get there, the upheaval takes place. Let me see if it says how long they were there. First year went by quickly, was relatively uneventful, but by the beginning of the second year, things were changing. So they were just over a year. And let's see if it, there's the threat of the Simbas in 1964. I don't remember if I have this in the notes, but it does say that he was attending an average of 200 patients a day. Now, how is that even humanly possible? You have to understand that probably the vast majority of those patients are people he's just seeing briefly, or perhaps even several together. They have the same ailment and he's giving them counsel, or whatever. So it's not like he's attending one person at a time. I mean, just think about it. If you did 15 minutes a day, 200 a day, that's what? Help me out with my math. That's 50 hours. 200 divided by 4, 50. That'd be 50 hours a day if he met with each patient 15 minutes a day. So you know that that's not exactly how it's happening. Okay?
A lot of times there too, they just need like Tylenol. They don't have Tylenol.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. He may have a list of people that have these. He may just be prescribing stuff and sending it out with a nurse or clinician or something like that. But still, that's still a lot of people that have to attend in one way or another. So the Simbas began their threat in 64. And they take the family across the border to the Central African Republic. So CAR and the Congo are neighbors. And the Simba Rebellion, all that. I don't know, the Lion King Simba, that's the name comes from this. It was just a common name, I couldn't tell you that. My kids actually sent my wife and I, they gave us a gift of going to the Des Moines Civic Center and seeing Lion King last year. That was really cool. All right, the acting of the actors, you know. So this happens, you know, he's going back and forth, and he makes one last visit he visits his family, and he wants to go back and take care of, wrap some things up in the Congo. And they end up being there when the Simba attack takes place in their community. And it results in 3 months of torture finally ending in his death. Now, remember that the conflict, I mean, who was it that had ruled the Congo for so many years? What country had ruled the Congo?
Belgium?
Right, and he's an American, right? So what does this have to do with it? He's not a Belgian, he's an American. So why is he attacked and tortured and killed?
It was a mistake for one.
Uh,
It looks like,
he's white,
yeah. It looks like
okay? Yeah, you have to understand that for the Africans there in the Congo, it really didn't matter whether you were European or American, you know, if you were British or Belgian or if you're white, and the white man posed a threat to that they were they felt very insecure with the presence of white people. Yep. All right. So yeah, he eventually is killed, and here's the grave marker. Dr. Paul E. Carlson, March of 28. My mom was born 2 months after him. They're almost exactly the same age. To November of 64. And then there's something in, well, I don't know what language that is. It might be the local language. But yeah. So again, you know, we asked the question, was he killed because he was a Christian? Well, indirectly, yes, but directly, no, he was killed because he was a white man. And white people were considered a threat. All right. So, you know, look at this. Here's a guy that wrestles with the will of God, and even wrestles with God himself if it exists. God gets a hold of his heart, he yields himself, and he goes, and you could look at this sarcastically and say, so what does he get for yielding himself to the Lord? Death. You know what I mean? Somebody from the outside could easily look at, how would you answer somebody that would say that? I come to you, I'm the skeptic. I say, yeah, you know, it'd been better if he'd have continued, you know, just questioning God's existence. At least he lived. He would have lived and had a nice, you know. And so he says yes to God, and how does God repay him for submitting to God? Killing him. So answer me. I'm the critic. What are you going to say to me?
Well, if he's questioning the existence of God, that kind of brings questions of whether he's saved or not. So, I don't know, sometimes you can still question God after you've gotten saved, but I don't know. It's kind of the question of, was he saved before and he said yes to God and maybe he lost his mortal physical life, but he's alive eternally now.
Okay. So to put it another way, the eternal perspective on this is very, very important, right? Getting right with God, giving assurance for eternity. Yeah. Good. Anything else come to mind?
What was the question again?
I'm the critic, and I'm saying to you, you know, a lot of good it did him to get right with God and to yield himself to the Lord. He ends up dying a few years later. So, what would you say, Matthew?
I don't know, I guess the critic, are they unbeliever, non-believer?
Yeah,
So they are unbeliever?
I'm making myself a
Okay.
critic. I'm creating a scenario here.
I don't know, I guess first thing comes to mind are like, who are you to say that like we get to decide how we live our lives? Like, you know, if that was God's will for him, like he did it, he submitted to it. And like Laura was saying, like he's in heaven now. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, technically he's really one. I mean, he's with Jesus now forever.
Yeah. And so that echoes what she said, the eternal perspective, what really matters in the end. This life's a vapor.
It also implies too that if he had not if he had still questions God's existence and maybe not gone to the mission field, he'd still be alive. But that's also no guarantee. Like, he could have gotten sick and died at the same age from some sickness or something.
Yeah. You could ask the simple question, is it better to live a long, prosperous life away from God or a short life walking with God? We know the answer to that, right? And the critic may not get that. If he doesn't, then that's okay. We just accept that and move on. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Yeah. He's not the only one that would be, criticized. I mean, if you were to talk to his wife, and I don't have any word from his wife here, you were to ask her, what would you rather, that he had continued questioning God and you guys would have remained in the States and had a nice home and everything, or would you rather this? I can guarantee you she would say, this is what we would choose in a heartbeat. I mean, couldn't Mr. Stearns ask the same thing? Here's a wife that loves the Lord, she's serving the Lord, and she doesn't even get to see her children grow up. But then you need to go back to that eternal perspective. Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting story. His name actually got on the front of Time magazine, the Congo Massacre. Now, that kind of thing, I suppose, I don't know how many people were killed. I don't remember if the book tells that or not, but it was a big deal. And then the left side is just a picture of him attending to people who are struggling. Now that's a white lady on the stretcher there. So I don't know if that's depicting people who have been attacked by the Simba people, and who's ministering to, I'm not sure. All right, here's another guy, Chet Bitterman. Sharon, back to what you said a few days ago, this is the hard part of the book, right? This is the story of American linguist. Now we're going to switch from medical to linguist. So, is there any missionary specialization that'll protect you from possible persecution and danger? No. You got a doctor. You might think, man, a doctor, at least the simple people would value. I mean, he could help them, but no, it's not. It doesn't matter. Here's a linguist called to die. Chet Bitterman. He was from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. 1953 he was born, so moving up a few years. Studied at Columbia Bible College. I think it's in the DC area. And he was interested in linguistics. Okay, who's the guy we studied that founded what became the largest mission agency? What was his name? Get ready for the final exam. Well, do you remember what the agency's name is? You guys don't have anything to do but history of missions here, right? You don't have any other classes, do you?
I can't remember all these names.
Well, okay, the agency is named after a famous English martyr who wanted to translate the Bible into the English language. John Wycliffe. Wycliffe Bible Translators. And do you remember what the division is, the other division of it that's up in Wisconsin? Summer Institute of Linguistics, SIL. And the name of the guy that founded all this, California, Cam Townsend. Okay? All right. You're just being humble. You really know all this. If you teach this class for 16 years like that, you probably remember it a little better too. I have an unfair advantage. Okay, so he studied for 2 summers at the Summer Institute of Linguistics. Okay? And I don't know when it went to Wisconsin or if they had other places. I'm not sure where he studied. But he struggled with the language. Isn't it interesting how many people we have talked about that God led to foreign missions and struggle with the language? Yeah, lots of people wrestled. So he ends up going to Columbia in 1979 with his pregnant wife, Brenda. That's another thing. How many times have we seen people making these huge, long trips with pregnant wives? And it's not like today where you hop on an airplane, you may have one layover and you complain about the 3-hour layover somewhere. These guys, this is 79, so they would have flown, okay? In this case, I think they would have flown. So Brenda was a Wycliffe MK from Columbia. So she's going home. Columbia. I never noticed this before, but he studied at Columbia Bible College, but that's not in Columbia, okay? Don't confuse those. That's Columbia Bible College. I think it's in DC or in that region. Nothing to do with the country. They had wanted to go to Malaysia. Now, this is interesting. Where's Malaysia?
Burma, isn't it?
It's in the South Asian cluster. Yep.
In that area?
Yep, exactly. There, Vietnam, Thailand, that was all part of that region. So totally different area of the world that they were thinking of. But Wycliffe asked them to go to Columbia. And there was a need there for a Bible translator. And look, his wife is an MK from there, it just makes sense. I can relate to that. My wife is an MK from Brazil. When God led us to Brazil, I remember first thinking, it makes too much sense. It can't be that easy. It's got to be something really weird, we wouldn't expect. And it wasn't. And he thought the same way. Brenda was born and reared in Columbia. I don't know if she was born there, but she'd gone there at least with her parents. So they go to Columbia.
Dr. Martin,
Yeah.
how did you and Becky know that God was leading you to Brazil?
Okay. Try to give you the short answer to that.
Sorry, it's
We took a lot of time. I had no idea where to go. Okay, I didn't even know if I was going to be a missionary or a pastor when I graduated. I went to Faith 5 years. Graduated not knowing. I met Becky, and so, but both of us were hesitant to look toward Brazil because we didn't want to go just because she grew up there and liked it. And so we actually avoided Brazil in our considerations. And it wasn't until my second year in seminary out in Washington State that we started getting some vibes. We actually, I just should back up. We did do a short-term 6-week missions trip to Brazil in the summer. We were engaged. We were engaged a year and a half. That's too long usually, but we were apart for a year of that engagement, so that helped. But started getting letters from people in Brazil saying we need help teaching a Bible school here, training nationals. Can you help us? So little by little, that began to make sense. And I never considered myself somebody who would be a teacher in a Bible school, there or here. Yeah. So that's the short of it. Sometime over coffee, you and my wife can go in more detail about that if you want. She has a lot of good things to say about that. So we arrive in they arrive in Columbia, and look at this: 3 unsuccessful attempts with different language groups. They want to translate. Apparently, Wycliffe didn't have a specific targeted people group, but they're trying to find different places, and it's not working out. So how long do you keep doing this before you say, okay, God must have something else? We made a mistake. So here, and you don't miss the random things that God does. With God, nothing is random. It's from where we sit. He has this gallbladder issue, and he's going to make a routine trip up to the capital. Bogota is the capital of Colombia. And in most Latin American countries, the capital city is also the largest city in the state. One of the things that the US did really well was to keep most capital cities out of in other words, in most states, the capital city is not the largest city. For instance, Washington State is not Seattle. It's what capital of Washington? Olympia. Who's ever heard of Olympia, Washington? California. It's not LA. It's not San Diego. It's Sacramento, which is big, but nothing like San Jose or Dallas. Okay, is not the capital of Texas. What's the capital of Texas?
Houston?
No, Houston's like number 8 in the world, in the United States. Austin, Texas. Okay. Now, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Okay. Ohio, Columbus. Okay. So in Latin America, when missionaries needed to get medical treatment, they would typically drive or fly to the capital to have it done because that's where most of the advanced medical facilities are located. That's what he did. There's somewhere they're trying to find places among people groups, and he needs gallbladder surgery, so he goes to the capital. Everybody just routine, he'll take care of that and come back and we'll continue. And God has other plans. So while he's there, he's staying at the Summer Institute of Linguistics residence in preparation for the treatment. So, and that's typical. Wycliffe had a place there, and so the missionaries could stay there if they were going up there for business or to renew a visa, whatever it might be. And lo and behold, unexpected by anybody except God himself and the kidnappers, is this kidnapping. It's happened at 6:30 in the morning. All of a sudden, bang, 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 And these were leftist guerrillas. And the word guerrillas was very commonly used when I was growing up, 60s and 70s. You heard about leftist guerrillas all the time. What is guerrilla? Why do they call guerrillas? Notice it's not spelled like the animal. What does the word guerrilla refer to? Guerrilla warfare is the non-traditional warfare, non-conventional warfare. In fact, this is just a little bit of a rabbit trail, but even during the Revolutionary War, one of the advantages that the colonists had was they fought in an unconventional, almost guerrilla type way. Guerrilla warfare is fought behind trees and things. They don't line up in these regiments, like you see some doing. And so that's one of the things that made the Vietnam War so hard for the Americans. They were fighting against guerrilla warfare, where you just never know where they are and what they're going to do, and there's no rhyme or reason, and that's on purpose. So you're constantly in danger of somebody being behind a tree or up there, and so that was happening here as well. So there were 12 adults and 5 children staying at the residence there when this happened, and so he wasn't there by himself. Now here's what's interesting. Here's the ordeal. They're all forced to lie face down on a cold cement floor. They're tied and gagged. 12 adults, 5 children. And this goes on for about an hour and a half. They're all just lying there waiting and wondering what in the world is going to happen to them. The real target wasn't even Chet Bitterman. Al Wheeler was the director of SIL at that time, but guess what? He was gone on business somewhere. I can't remember. He had to be gone. And Chet Bitterman filled in for him. So Chet Bitterman actually went for 2 reasons. He went to get his surgery, but because Wheeler was gone, they asked Chet if he would kind of fill in as the director until Wheeler came back. And so they were actually going after the director, and because he wasn't there. So how would you feel if you were Al Wheeler? You might tend to feel like, whew, man, I'm glad I wasn't there, but you also might tend to feel guilty, like I was the one they were after and Chet died in my place. People have to deal with that kind of stuff, And so the demand was that the SIL move out of Columbia. Why? Because it's not because the SIL, it's not because language translation was a threat to them. It's because they wanted to weed out all Westerners. Okay, that's the issue. Just like with see, I can't remember, Paul Carlson. It wasn't because he was a doctor, it's because he was a white man. In this case, it's not because they're doing Bible translation, because they're Christians. It's because they're Westerners. That's the problem. And remember, Colombia has a history of conflict with, drug use and all that, and so the cartels and all that. And the U.S. was working hard to send people down because these guys were wanting to cross the U.S. border and all that. And so it's all political. All right. Almost out of time. So the deadline passes for them. I can't remember how much time they gave them, but SIL did not give in. Then people started hearing conflicting stories. Yeah, they're dead. No, they're still alive. Well, I don't know. This went on for a little bit. He spent 48 days, about a month and a half in captivity. And he actually his captors were friends with him. They played chess together. They even joked and stuff. These guys had nothing against him personally. Okay, this was a political thing. But when it came time to execute him, friendship was over. And they found him dead on a bus on March 7, 1979. And you have to ask the question, here. Okay, Al Wheeler happened to be gone. He happened to be there. God allowed him to have, if he hadn't had this gallbladder issue, he wouldn't have been there. But as a Christian, you don't start asking those questions. You say, wait a minute, God was ready to take this man home. And it didn't matter what happened. God, when God's done with us, he's done with us. And just like the case with the Stams, where they got false information about the situation where they went. Well, God was going to take them one way or the other. And that's what you have to keep in mind. There are no accidents when it comes to God's leading. If he's ready to take you, he's going to take you. When he's done with you, he's done with you. And that really gives us comfort. No mistakes. All right, we will stop there, talk about Don McClure on Friday. No more reading to do, right? So we'll just continue on in our study. All right, thanks, everybody.